Civilizational America is under attack. So how shall we defend her? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another Declaration of Truth with your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. America, or rather the values that made her great, has come under the worst attack in her history. The attackers have intensified their offensive because lately certain key leaders have taken upon themselves the defense of those values. Like bullies smarting from a blow from their targets, these civilizational value deniers have renewed their attack. Oddly, 2 of the 3 recent American bank failures have revealed more of the tactics of that attack. The only way for good-hearted Americans to win is to understand what values they need to defend. These are core civilizational values, and understanding them has become vital. Before I begin the deep dive into American values, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which depicts a child in the womb with this caption: "Not your body, not your choice." Only, I'm not going to talk mainly about carrying a pregnancy to term versus ending it prematurely. I want to talk about influences designed to make sure that pregnancies never come to pass, and why these influences have come, and how to recognize them, to act against them. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. By now, all Americans know about the collapse of the Silvergate, Silicon Valley, and Signature banks. But you might not know what at least 2 of those banks were doing shortly before they failed. Silicon Valley Bank committed $5 billion to support a campaign to curtail resource use. Now, the specific one was fossil fuels. For perspective, their books were $2 billion out of balance. So if they hadn't committed to that disastrous project, they might still be in business. And now that the FDIC has called on all the other banks to bail them out, they're still at it. Likewise, Signature Bank's executive staff made several videos. They're called the Dance Party videos, demonstrating anti-civilizational bias and not attention to their business. At least one of these videos featured the introduction of gender-neutral third-person singular pronouns into spoken English. In fact, whoever prepared the display of a third-person singular system other than they, their, theirs, and them managed to borrow a nominative and objective pronoun substitute from 2 different systems. They took Z from an anonymous 2013 proposal and here, the possessive, from the Hyde 2001 system. I have links in the description to descriptions of both proposals, courtesy of the Wayback Machine. And as to Signature Bank, if their financial acumen was as sloppy as their research, no wonder that bank failed. This attack on the concept of gender has spread to other languages, including Polish, Swedish, and Norwegian. Someone who tried to introduce this concept into French provoked concerted opposition. Larousse, the French equivalent of the Oxford English Dictionary, calls that what it is: a direct attack on French civilization. Now, these might seem like little things, but little things lead to big things. Erasing gender from spoken English, for example, is part of erasing gender from the human identity. How else to explain the raft of requests for sexual reassignment therapy that amount to surgical mutilation and hormonal poisoning? Did you see Reese Witherspoon having such a patient on her show? So help me, she knelt before him her, it. Why did another entertainer, definitely past her prime, actually decry laws to forbid doctors to treat children in this way? And also to say that your biological or born gender determines your sporting division. Said she, and this is a direct quote, "This is how Hitler started, just weeding everybody out." Unquote, Cyndi Lauper. The laws she decries say nothing about summary execution or even about segregation. And furthermore, such treatments are non-viable anyway. Lay aside that one subjected to such treatment cannot reproduce. And that's very likely the idea. We now hear of patient remorse. And worse, those who opt for or get pushed into such treatment are more likely rather than less to consider ending it all. Even apart from that, critical feminism, for lack of a better term, tells men they are worse than superfluous. I'm going to quote you some lyrics from number 13 from Gilbert and Sullivan's Princess Ida operetta. Now let's set the stage. Prince Hilarion and his two young friends Cyril and Florian have surreptitiously entered Castle Adamant, where Ida, his betrothed, has been running a women's university. The three have found a forgotten lesson book, and here's Cyril quoting from it. Each newly joined aspirant to the clan must repudiate the tyrant known as man. They mock at him and flout him, for they do not care about him, and they're going to do without him if they can. And how shall posterity come into being? Blank out. Princess Ida, at the end of that play, admits she never thought about it. Now, of course, the proponents of this toxic ideology counter that civilizational America would have to be a dictatorship. That's wrong. It cannot be a dictatorship or it won't be America anymore. So adults who want to embrace such ideologies and practices may do so. They should remember, though, that some of us will have trouble understanding why they did what they did. The problem is that they want to force those ideologies on the rest of us. That can have only one motive: to depopulate the country. Once again, population becomes a theater of war between civilization and anti-civilization. That's the motive for making women's sport a retirement plan for failed male athletes. I have a link in the description to a video making that point. But more broadly, that's also the motive to make a woman ashamed of the concept woman or the role of women. Recreational drugs pose another, more immediate and deadly problem. Today, the drug that bears most mention is the synthetic opioid fentanyl, F-E-N-T-A-N-Y-L. Fentanyl has medicinal value, as, for example, an anesthetic. But we hear of people dying every day from overdoses. And here we have an extreme irony. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida is blaming the American people for the spectacle of fentanyl smuggling across the U.S.-Mexican border. Actually, she makes the absurd claim that Americans are doing the actual smuggling. And of the role of Mexican drug cartels, she prefers not to speak. But if Americans do bear any of the blame, they do so only by demanding fentanyl. A viable civilization does not support that kind of demand and does not contribute to it. But that creates another problem. Democrats have traditionally worked to legalize recreational drugs. Have they now changed their minds? I don't think so. Like so much else, they don't want you to look at their own history or motives. So much for the attack on American values. So how shall we defend American civilizational core values? As it happens, America starts at a different place from the other civilizational states. Russia, India, China. Well, China's a special case. They're going to have to sort out whether they want to be a civilizational state or an empire builder. Americans do not define any such thing as the American race. We know that there is only one race, the human race. Instead, Americans have a set of values that it invites anyone to share. The Constitution of the United States remains today the best framework to serve these core values. It is far from perfect, to be sure, but last summer the United States Supreme Court put in place several decisions that make those core values easier to defend. First in importance is Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, hence this t-shirt. That decision didn't make it unlawful nationwide to end a pregnancy before term, but it allows any state to do so if it so wishes. Next, I'm going to list two decisions that didn't come in sequence but did address the same things. Carson versus Macon and Kennedy versus Bremerton School District. These protect religion against those who wish to outlaw it. And by the way, Coach Joe Kennedy has just received a settlement with the Bremerton School Board, under which they will pay his attorney's fees, $2 million worth. Congratulations, Joe Kennedy. And last but not least, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. This protects our right to keep and bear arms. Of course, many state governments and the United States Senate stand opposed to these values. Therefore, the defense of them requires continuing to press the point in our law courts. Be sure that the other side will press their point. So what are the values? Begin with life first, and life must start at conception. No one has yet made a consistent argument for that. Someone must. And Justice Clarence Thomas seems to stand ready to accept it. Liberty next, which means ordered liberty. One person's liberty ends where another's life or property begins. Which brings us to property, or the pursuit of happiness, as Jefferson put it. That comes third. Property of all kinds deserves protection, but some property assertions are never acceptable, like asserting that any person is the property of another. Now, that last requires two clarifications. Obviously, slavery in the original sense is wrong. It is never permissible. But nor may the state declare all persons the property of all other persons. Beyond these things, one must define certain concepts that do allow, even require, the state to override what some individuals might consider their liberty. The concept minor is one. Minors do exist, and a sound society forbids them certain activities and also forbids adults to entice them into those activities. That's why the old cigarette vending machines had little sticky notes plastered to them reading, and I quote, "Sales of cigarettes to minors are forbidden by law," close quote. The same holds for the purchase, attempted purchase, consumption, or transport of alcoholic beverages by or to minors. That also applies to sexual reassignment or gender affirmation. No child can make such a decision, though some might argue that such reassignment is biologically or medically easier before puberty than during or after. That does not make it permissible. Next, we want to talk about why we see an escalation of the attack on Civilizational America. But first, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past 2 years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. And whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, the attack on the civilizational values, even the population of America, has accelerated for a simple reason. Those who want to promote a one-world government with themselves as its leaders know that demographics limits their time. Their most ardent adherents are having children. Some can't because they have chosen lifestyles and sometimes medical experimentation that prevent it. Others refuse and even want to deny the choice of having children to others. Witness Jane Fonda calling for a violent response to the Dobbs decision. As long as this continues, the political left, not the right, will die out. The deep state knows this. That's why they pushed an immunization preparation that many are now acknowledging was worse than useless. And that could explain the Ohio train wreck and the handling of it. Besides the birth rate divide, America has a rural-urban divide. In a well-functioning civilization, cities function as incubators of learning and the arts. But in America today, cities have become incubators of anti-civilizational values. 5 months ago, one influencer predicted that this divide could result in civil war. If that happens, those who control the resources and preserve civilizational values would win. I have a link in the description to his video, the one with a thumbnail showing a few blue islands and narrow strips in a sea of red, which happens to be a county-by-county map of which party carried what in the election of 2020. And why would those who preserve civilizational values win the war? Because good civilizational values also make good soldiers. Things need not come to this pass. It will be left to defenders of civilizational values to defend their own space, preferably by legal and judicial means. After that, attrition alone will decide the contest. And in case you don't believe the attack is continuing, or don't think you've seen any evidence of it, let me give you 2 examples. Lauren Witzke, a recent Senate candidate, has noticed the attack on Civilizational America for some time. Yesterday, she mentioned Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow. That does not make the one-worlders happy. But Ms. Witzke points out certain things that neither Russia nor China tolerate. I have a link in the description to her tweet, in which she says, quote, "So many are screeching about Putin and Xi taking over the world, but their countries aren't allowing pedophiles to teach children. Their countries aren't allowing drag queen story hour and showing off-color adult stuff to preschoolers. Xi and Putin aren't sending out congratulation letters to transgenders. I'm more worried about the continued promotion of the alternative lifestyle agenda America is pushing onto our children and future generations." Close quote. Nor does this attack limit itself to America. Michael Shellenberger, yesterday at noon 15, shared a story of a transgender with patient remorse. She is suing her doctors for misdiagnosing her as a trans man when she was not. Mr. Shellenberger dropped a thread on it, and I have links to the first and third tweets. Shellenberger begins, quote, "Progressives say they care more than do others about people with developmental and psychiatric disorders, but it's increasingly clear that progressive medical providers have mistreated many people with autism by misdiagnosing them as trans. People with autism are disproportionately represented among those misdiagnosed with gender dysphoria. Michelle Zachinia, who is suing her medical provider for giving her a misdiagnosis and mistreating her, has thought deeply about why that is," unquote Mike Shellenberger. Now, isn't that interesting? She's on the autism spectrum and apparently is alleging in the suit that her doctors used that against her very cleverly. All right, sports fans, full disclosure, I am on the spectrum too. So I know exactly what Ms. Zachinia must be talking about. But don't take my word for it, nor even Mike Schellenberger's word. Let's hear her word in a long tweet, the kind with a show more link. Quote, I think there are a lot of reasons that autistic people are overrepresented among those who identify as transgender. Firstly, how autistic people interact with the environment is different from other people. In terms of sensory processing, for example, autistic children sometimes don't want to wear a shirt that has a tag on the back. For me, I didn't like wearing anything feminine because girls' clothing often had a lot of seams that I didn't want touching my skin, or there would be areas where the fabric was too tight. I attributed those things to my wanting to appear more masculine, but that wasn't really the case. It was more that I just wanted to be comfortable. Another part of bodily differences is physical movement. Autistic people may have poor motor coordination, and if they have anxiety, most do, they're even less connected with their bodies. I did dance classes when I was younger, and I remember feeling like every other girl in that room had some kind of effortless elegance that I didn't. Even that lack of gracefulness was something I later retconned as unfeminine and a sign that I was actually transgender. Let me take a break right here, because my hackles are already standing up on end with that word retcon. Retcon stands for retroactive continuity. When you read or go see a prequel to a book or movie that's been out for years, and the prequel introduces a concept that makes you say, wait, that's not how I remember it in the original, they have to explain it. That explanation is a retcon, and retcon is also a verb that stands for the making of that explanation. We heard a lot about retcons after that god-awful Disney sequel trilogy to the Star Wars that came out. But in fact, we saw plenty of retconning with the prequel trilogy to that franchise, especially in episode 1, which introduced a concept of a force-sensitive person carrying a cytoplasmic organelle that mundanes don't have, except no one ever said a word about that in episode 4, 5, or 6. That requires a retcon, which is that by the time a has-been general was reconnecting with a certain farm boy, the most excellent order of the Jedi had forgotten all their high technological refinements, and that's why the old man didn't even remember ordering that exact same test on that farm boy's 7-year-old father when the father was then 7 years old. So now this woman, Michelle Zakinya, is saying that she actually figured that she was unfeminine. She made a retcon on herself because she lacked the usual grace of neurotypical girls in a dance class. Or rather, her doctors encouraged that particular retcon so that they could collect their big, fat fee. Moving on. In terms of cognitive reasons, we get drawn into the ideology. Autistic people can be prone to black and white thinking and feel comforted by having rules set out for them. If I don't feel like a girl, I must be a boy. If I say all the right things, I'll be recognized as a good person. We're also generally more susceptible to manipulation. We can be gullible, particularly because we tend to think literally and take what people say at face value rather than read between the lines. And finally, autistic people tend to obsess over special topics. Gender became one of mine. Unquote, Michelle Zakinya. You want to know what I think? I think she was the canary in the coal mine with regard to a medical establishment run amok in service to the deep state. But in bringing her lawsuit, she illustrates something else. Her doctors lied to her. And if you lie to anyone on the spectrum and that person comes to realize it, you have made an implacable enemy. Now, this person is a Canadian, but I am absolutely certain that American medicine is full of such cases. So now, let's sum it up, shall we? Americans must decide whether they want to be part of a civilization or join a murder-suicide pact. The ideologies of the political left all have in common the inevitable destruction of life. The left dares not refrain from this line of attack because they know they are dying out. Demography is destiny, they crowed, until they realized who were having the children and who weren't. Then they said, uh-oh. After that, they changed their tactics and their intermediate objective. But their ultimate objective remains. Civilizations rise or fall as they defend or abandon new life. For without new life, the civilization dies. Links in the description of the article to those 2 separate proposals for common gender third-person singular English pronouns, to the video saying women's sports shouldn't be a retirement plan for failed male athletes, to the video projecting a possible American war of the urbans and the rurals and who would win, to Lauren Witzke's tweet pointing out that Presidents Xi and Putin are not threatening civilizational values but protecting them, to Mike Shellenberger's thread about the detransitioning woman suing her doctors for malpractice, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursilverlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to my earlier video about America becoming a civilizational state and the 2 other videos I mentioned. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.